Right, well, hello, dear viewers. Welcome to first edition of Then, Now, and what's it called?
Then, now, and the future.
Then, Now, and the Future. Okay, sorry about that. We just decided the title just before, so that's why it wasn't 100% clear. But anyway, my name's Peter Sandle. I don't really want to say anything more than that. I mean, because this whole thing is like a sort of autobiographical joint venture here. That's me. And Marcus.
Hi, I'm Marcus. I'm a life coach, but back in the day I was a journalist, and after that I worked in local government as a senior PR guy. And these are just going to be chats between Peter and I about life, the universe, and everything, I guess, Peter.
Yep, that's basically the idea. So Marcus and I met on sort of networking, in a networking context, and we just found that we had some sort of connection and had good chat, and just looking for something useful to do to share our thoughts, our experiences. So we thought that talking about the past, it's for us in and of itself, it's a valuable process. For people of our generation, it's going to sort of spark thoughts for them, and also for the younger generations. Those, it's a record. It's some connection with that past. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. And Marcus, what would you say about the project as a whole, which we're trying to introduce right now?
Yeah, really exactly what you've said, Peter, because I think for people of our generation, some of the things we're going to chat about will bring back some great memories, nostalgia, if you like. But equally for people not of our generation, I'm reminded, for example, of some teenagers who were given a project. They were given an old dial telephone and asked what they thought it was and how they thought it might work, and did not have a clue.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. What is this thing? What is this dial? How does this
You mean
work?
it was like a standard old phone with the receiver on top?
Yeah, that's right. And the round dial.
And they had no idea at all what it was?
No idea at all about how it worked.
Really? But they knew it was a phone, I suppose, did they?
Yeah, I think, yeah, they were told it was a phone, but they had no idea, how it worked, what this dial was, how did.
Yeah. Okay. So that says a lot, doesn't it? So, I mean, so much has changed in the past 50 years, that, there's a lot of bridging to be done there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the leap in science and technology, and life in general over the last 50, 60, 70 years has been huge. And life now is very different from when you and I were growing up, and it couldn't be more different. And I think it will be lovely just to trace some of those events, some of those changes that we've witnessed and seen, and perhaps how that's affected our lives.
Yeah, that's it. You come to this certain point in life where the sort of the significance of past events becomes clearer and more stronger somehow, and you just want to talk about it and look at the implications. So hopefully we'll bring people some useful thoughts that way.
Yeah, and I mean, significant things, I suppose, perhaps in our personal lives as well, and how they were, excuse me, how they were viewed back in the day and how they're viewed.
Yeah.
So, for example, I mean, let's start off by being a bit controversial. When I was a kid, homosexuality was a criminal offence, and you went to prison for it.
Yes.
Force was the biggest disgrace that you could have. And yet these things now are totally turned on their head over the course of half a century.
That's right.
That wheel has turned full circle.
Yeah, that is very striking. Yeah.
So just in terms of sort of social transformations,
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And you forget this, don't you? Because it's a slow, gradual process, but you forget where you started.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
there's that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with a guy who'd been in prison because he was homosexual.
Really. Mm.
Yeah. And yeah, it's I remember as a child walking in the West End with my parents took me to the West End in London,
Yeah.
and I was I couldn't stop staring because there were two guys walking down the road holding hands.
Mm.
Really,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
was these things were all a big deal back in the day.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, sort of sensitivities have changed, haven't they, completely?
Yeah,
So
a black guy and a white woman walking together, people were absolutely horrified.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think these are the sorts of things from the social side of stuff that we can perhaps talk about and reflect on,
Yeah.
as well as
That's it. And another thing which suggested this format to me was just the possibility of talking about ideas. I mean, I guess I've had all sorts of ideas which are quite over the years, which I felt strongly about, and I want to communicate with people. But it's been very hard to find a means to do that, and you sit down, you try and write something or whatever. And this is, we've already discussed this, haven't we, Marcus, that, when two people discuss something, it sort of becomes more relevant, more real. But if I just, shoot off my own little, solo video or solo, just whatever book that comes into my head, the danger of disconnect is much higher. And I think what I want to do with this is connect, so connect with people.
I think it was Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich.
Yes.
Talks about the compound impact of two people's minds joining together.
Yeah, right.
What you get from that is a compound factor. It's not just the two minds. It's something bigger than the two minds.
Yeah, that's it. And I think what inspired me for this, I've seen you see more and more, don't you, videos like this on YouTube or wherever, and people are doing precisely that. It's a very open conversation. People are giving each other equal weight, and they're coming up with some great thoughts. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess what we're going to do is perhaps look at some stuff in the past, look at some stuff in the now, and perhaps our thoughts about where all this might be going in the future, over the course of our conversations.
Yes. Yeah. So what would be your first thought in that respect?
Well, it's always good to start at the beginning, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, I was born in 1951.
Right.
It's at this point where you say you don't look that old, Marcus. So
that's good. Good. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, I didn't think you were that old, so well done.
So perhaps starting sort of back in the 50s, it wasn't that long after the end of the Second World War.
Yes, that's right. Just 6
years. There was still a certain amount of rationing that was taking place. I say to people, I mean, I grew up where most of my clothes were hand-me-downs from an older brother and an older cousin.
Yeah, right.
But for me to get something brand new, wow, that was something, really special. There were
yes, and my connection with that period, I was born in 65, so 14 years later, but still a strong connection with the Second World War. My parents had lots of stories about, they were out in the country, obviously during that period. So I heard about that. And also another thing we mentioned last time we spoke was about bomb sites, this thing that London, I mean, my first 5 years were in Blackheath in South London, and, near our house was a bomb site. And, you know, it was just an empty or building site, you might call it, but it was actually, you know, it wasn't flat ground or anything, and it was a great play area, you know. So we used to, little kids, we used to just go there and mess around with all this sand and earth, and I don't know, highly dangerous, I should think, by modern standards, but that was life.
Exactly. So I grew up in North London in Stoke Newington. So my parents ran a grocery shop in the high street, directly opposite Stoke Newington police station, which is still there. And just on the corner, you know, so diagonally, not more than a couple of 100 yards away, a big block of flats that was hit by, I think, a V1 or a V2 bomb or whatever. You know, loads of people got killed. There were bomb sites all round where I used to live.
Yes. Yes. Even my grandparents, they, as I remember, they lived in Buckland Crescent in Swiss Cottage, and I think it was their house, but you know, there are those older houses, I don't know, 100 years or so old houses, but there was one which was a modern one, you know, in the row. Same story, I think.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember, because, you know, as I say, my parents ran a grocery shop, but there was a guy a few shops down from us who ran a similar sort of grocery shop. He did something, though, that was very different. And, you know, sort of environmental health these days would be absolutely horrified. But he sold pickled cucumbers, and he sold them in a big wooden barrel. So, you know, a big round wooden barrel,
right,
full of brine and all the pickling stuff and what have you. And the cucumbers were in there. And if you went into the shop and said you wanted a pickled cucumber, he'd roll his sleeve up and stick his hand into the barrel and pull out these and these were what's known as new green cucumbers. Absolutely delicious. But he'd stick his arm into the barrel.
Of course.
Environmental health these days.
That's right, and nobody suffered, I'm sure, because of it. Anyway,
and nobody died because he put his arm in the barrel.
That's right.
But these are the sorts of memories that stick with you. You know, butter used to come in big slabs, and I remember my father with two sort of like wooden platters, and he'd, you know, take a chunk off and pat it all up, and then he'd wrap it in the Anchor butter wrapper. You know, so they were sort of like individually wrapped off a big slab. You know, these are, you know, as a kid, I would have been, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old or something. But these sort of little memories that.
Dairy product was the milkman, wasn't it? That was another one.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody actually delivering the milk to your door. The whole routine. You know, I've explained to younger people about, you know, the different tops you had. You had the glass bottle, the silver top, you know, and according to whether it was full cream or otherwise.
That's right. You had silver, red, and gold.
Yeah.
And yes, and you'd leave a little wrapped up note at the top of the milk bottle, you know, shoved inside the milk bottle, asking for an extra pint.
Yeah, that's right. Or you could have a little sort of crate thing with a dial on it. You could dial the number of, you know, how many bottles you wanted this time. But yeah, so again, so more labor intensive pass, wasn't it?
Yeah, and something else that you absolutely wouldn't get these days. We lived above the shop, and at first floor level, we had this little sort of terrace, I suppose, and that's where our dustbin was. And the dustman, when they came to do the collections, the dustman would walk up a very steep flight of stairs, come and collect our dustbin, take it down, and would bring us back the empty dustbin. He'd come up the stairs, down.
Oh, right, yeah. Now you have to put it right on the road, okay?
But he'd be walking down the stairs with this dustbin over his shoulder. And I don't know, I think mum, you know, used to give him you know, sort of a couple of pence or something for his, you know, for his trouble. But, you know, talk about a personal sort of refuse collection.
Yeah, right. Yeah, very.
Yeah, and as you say, these days you actually have to, take it to the top of your drive and
make sure it's in the right place, or it'll just get overlooked, won't it?
And make sure the lid's shut and all the rest of it. So these are the sorts of things that there were still guys, coal merchants with horse-drawn carts.
Oh yeah, that also, I think I just overlapped with that.
Yeah, and breweries that had their deliveries.
They also had horses as well.
Yeah,
and the rag and bone man. Do you remember the rag and bone man?
Yeah.
That was also a horse-drawn operation, wasn't it?
That's right. And we were on a main bus route, so you still had the old trolley buses with the overhead wires.
Okay. We still have those on the continent, but yeah, I haven't seen those in the UK. No, that was before. They must have been phased out.
Yeah,
I don't know when they were phased out, but
I can't remember when. Were they then taken over by the route masters, which were a super?
Could be. Okay, that's a little bit of. Okay, if we have enough interest, somebody will comment about that. So
yeah, that's probably jumping a decade or so. But yeah, all of these, the street scene was a very, very different.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, great, Marcus. Well, that's a sort of taster, I suppose, isn't it? We've seen the kind of thing that will come up. It's all fairly spontaneous, but I guess we're going to be, as we progress, we're going to be focusing in a bit, to sort of periods.
Yeah, and maybe get into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think as we'll probably between sessions we'll have thoughts and share those, and that will help us to organise things. So just remains to thank anybody who's been watching for your attention. Absolutely. And we'll see you on the next video.
And like you said, if anyone has got any thoughts or observations, any comments,
yeah, that's it. So of course this is a communication process, so we're hoping to stir up some interest somewhere, so please let us know.
Absolutely.